Hey, welcome to God Vlog. I'm going to talk a little bit about the theophany. It's a fancy schmancy word that means a God appearance. They happen quite often in the Bible. And this particular theophany is when God appears to Abraham, tells him that he's going to have an everlasting covenant with him and continue to relate to him. And Abraham's 99 years old, and he promises Abraham that he's going to have a child. He and his 90-year-old wife, Sarai. Actually, at the time that the story begins, Abraham is known as Abram, and Sarah is known as Sarai, and their names all get changed. And as a matter of fact, it's such a powerful event that God, for the first time, is called El Shaddai, which is translated as God Almighty. The text is at Genesis 6:17, 1 to 7, and it's a lectionary reading. It skips from 7 then to verse 15 to 16. And before we get into the text, I want to explain that there's fingerprints of three writers in Genesis. Academics have identified over the years one they call J, which is the German word for Yahweh, starts with the J, and they call this writer the Yahwehist because the writer refers to God as Yahweh. And then there's another writer they call the Elohist because he refers to God as Elohim. And the other writer that we see in Genesis is commonly called the P for the priestly writer, and it may have been one or more writers. They were believed to have written during or just after the exile from Babylon conquers Israel and takes most of the leadership of Israel into exile, disrupts the entire state of Israel in the mid-6th century BC. And priestly writers were believed to have been writing at that period of time, and God, up until that point, was imagined by the people of Israel to have sided with Israel, to have helped them win victories over other people, to be an angry and punishing a kind of distant God that related and loved the people of Israel from afar. And when the exile occurs, it throws everything out of whack because that means God doesn't side with them anymore. And arising out of exile is a reimagination of God, figuring out a new way to understand their experiences of the great sacred God. And so the priestly writers are believed to have inserted Genesis 17, the story there of this conversation. The exile made this idea of God punishing seem impossible. That God had abandoned them, disliked them, or was not as they had imagined were the only choices. Israel's in an impossible situation. In exile, all seems lost, and the hope of continuation is gone. So P, the priestly writer, reimagines God of the universe, El Shaddai, God Almighty, cares so much for them in this reimagining. God initiates the relationship, and this is the God that most Christians understand, or many Christians understand, in Judaism as well. God appears in the theophany to the patriarch, and he promises the impossible to Abram and Sarai as symbols of all of Israel, a 90-year-old man, a 99-year-old man, and a 90-year-old wife, a woman, or a promise of child. And that is as impossible as it seems that Israel will continue on after the exile. But God does the impossible. God covenants to create generations, multitudes out of both Abram and Sarai. Their legacy will go on, and it does. And so does Israel's hope is reestablished. God does care, and God cares personally. And make sure to tell the patriarchy 2 times that Sarai is blessed, that women matter. This is not quite a feminist story, but one can hear God as treating women as equally and mattering in the story. There's this, the women are named, and twice Sarah is called blessed. Her name is is given by God, and the patriarchy is told that she is blessed and that generations will come from her. She's the mother of all Christians and all Judaism by the end of the story, and we tend to refer to them as Abrahamic religions, but there is this Sarah religion as well. She is equal in the story. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at a book called Feasting on the Word, and the author there writes, for once, Sarah's participation is neither assumed nor implied. God makes her a full partner in this enterprise, both by giving her a name and by promising her a blessing of her own. It's written by an incredible author named Barbara Brown Taylor. She's one of the best preachers known in America today. So at the end of this story, God gets called El Shaddai for the first time. Abram, the exalted father, is now known as Abraham, which means father of multitudes. And Sarai is thought to be our archaic version of princely or princess. She's now known as Sarah, which is usually translated as princess as well, a more modern version of it in the Hebrew. But some authors have speculated that Sarah actually means chief, or has its roots in the meaning for chief or captain, and may actually be referring to her as queen. So there's a sense of equality with patriarchy. There's also now a matriarchy, and so women are brought up to the same level. God is now relating to people personally and everlastingly. Patriarchy was put on notice 2,500 years ago that God blesses women, and that generations, multitudes come from her as well. She's an equal partner. There are these two equal parents of all Jews and Christians, Abraham and Sarah. Bottom line of the story, you can understand many facets of it, but the bottom line of the story, the way I'm looking at it today, is that God relates personally to humans and forever to them, to both men and women and their offspring. And it doesn't say just men offspring, male offspring, but also male and female offspring. And that God does the impossible for people. My name is Reverend Scott Elliott. I'm the pastor at Riviera United Church of Christ. Thank you for coming to a God vlog. And go in peace, knowing that you are loved and you matter.